Hello, Psychologies. Dav Piper here, and if you read the September issue, then you'll remember that I set you a little challenge, which was to plant some spring bulbs in a pot. This is the right time of year to do it. Spring bulbs will be in the shops from September, and it's just a really nice little thing to do. It's something I do every year, and it's really accessible as well. So, I mean, even if you've got limited mobility or you're not very strong, this is one thing that most people can probably do. And even if you don't have a big garden, I like to have a little pot outside my front door in the spring, just because it brightens everything up, and it's so nice. It's such a good way of starting the year, and it makes you realise that spring is coming. So yeah, I've got a little plastic pot here. I know it's plastic, but it's not single use. This has been with me for getting on for a decade. It gets rolled out every spring, so I think I don't feel too bad. So I've got some gravel in here, and I think it's really important when you're planting anything in pots to think about drainage. So make sure that all your outside pots have got holes in, and then also make sure that you've got something in there to help make sure the holes don't get blocked and help with the drainage. And one of the most common things is that people have problems with waterlogging and their pots don't drain well, and then your plants are basically sort of start rotting around the roots because they're too wet. So I make a habit of everything that I plant in a pot has some sort of extra help in the bottom, and you can use smashed up ceramic pots or gravel, or even some bigger pebbles. Like I have quite a lot of these around the garden. That would do if you just filled the bottom with those. So yeah, so you need a pot with drainage, and other things you're going to need is some compost. So I've got some recycled compost. I always try and reuse it if I can. So if you've had pots and you've emptied them out, just tip the compost into a bag and then you can use it again. It's really, really important to buy peat-free compost. And if you're not sure, if you're not sure why, and you don't really know much about compost, it's because farming peat bogs is really, really bad for the environment, and they're not replaceable. So if you want to learn a bit more about that, it'd be a really good thing to go have a little look on Google and just educate yourself on the importance of peat-free. And in the last few years, peat-free compost has come so far. It's very, very usable, and I can't really see any good reason now that you wouldn't use it. And in fact, a lot of the time, because it is a little bit rougher in texture, it's actually really good for things like pots because it drains really well. So peat-free compost, and then this is potting grit. It's basically really fine gravel. It's available, in all garden centres, and it's really useful just to have a bag around. It's useful in the spring if you're planting seeds or seedlings, cuttings, anything that's young and needs to develop roots. Potting grit just helps them, give them some space to get the roots down. But if you can't get it, I mean, bulbs are quite hardy, and as long as you've got some drainage in your pot, then you should be okay. I mean, it's not completely critical. So they say that you should mix roughly a third of grit in 2/3 of compost to just help the drainage. And then you're going to need some bulbs. Spring bulbs go on sale in September. I've got some here which saved from last year. And the really good thing about bulbs is that you can, once they've died off and their leaves have started to look like this, all bulbs can be dug up and then stored in a tray or in a cardboard box until next year, and then used again. So you can get years and years out of your bulbs. These were actually came from a customer of mine. They're hyacinth bulbs, and she had them in a pot outside her door for Christmas, but she didn't like them, so she told me to throw them away. and so I've kept them. So yeah, really good. Also, bulbs are quite cheap, so if you're new to gardening and you just want to experiment a bit, you can pick up bulbs in the supermarket, everywhere. And it's really good place to start out. It gives quite a good impact. Yeah, really good for low mobility, and as long as you've just got someone to help you. But yeah, so what we start by doing is just putting some compost in, and I mean, try and follow the instructions that come with your bulbs. They'll tell you how far apart to plant them, and how deep. But if you don't have instructions or labels, because this this happens to me every year, is if you don't label um, what they are, then you're just left with a lucky dip this time of year. And I think these look like mini daffodils, but we'll find out. um, so try and follow the instructions. If you don't have the instructions, most bulbs are happy to be planted sort of 2 to 3 times their own depth. Just a good rule of thumb to go by. And yeah, try and label the box when you dig them off, and then you won't have the mystery surprise. But I don't mind. I think a lot of people try and make gardening, this really difficult thing with all these rules and this whole nonsense about green fingers. But really, it should be more about just enjoying yourself. And I'm having a lovely evening in my garden. I've got a glass of wine, and I'm made a real space to sit and do this. And it's actually, just doing the activity as much as anything is sort of, very relaxing and mindful, and it's the taking part that counts as well. Like, don't feel pressured that you're doing it wrong, because everybody makes mistakes. Even professional gardeners get it wrong sometimes, but you learn to experiment as you go along. Yeah, make it fun. Don't worry about it too much. I mean, if you've only spent a couple of quid on bulbs, then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you had a nice evening in the garden and you got some fresh air. It's all good. So yeah, so we're going to start by just tipping some compost in. My compost's already got grit in it because it's been reused from another pot, but otherwise just mix your third of grit in. There we go. And so, right, we've got some hyacinth lucky dip bulbs, and I really should be wearing gloves. Not setting a very good example, because I don't think a lot of people realise how poisonous plants can be, and actually hyacinths are quite irritant if you get the juice on your skin. So yeah, please wear gloves, but taking professional liberties. Hyacinths actually one of the few bulbs that like to be near the top, so but they're quite easy to look after. And really good. Sometimes you get given those little baskets at Christmas with all little bulbs in. Just save them till next year, and then you get a free display. So yeah, I'm just planting these a couple of inches apart, leaving the tops poking out for the hyacinths, and because they're ones that like to be near the top. And just check none of your bulbs have gone squashy or rotted over the winter, which can happen. You want nice firm ones. So I'm making a little centre with the few hyacinths I've got. You're getting some audio from Teddy there. What are you doing? And I've also got some tulips, which were left over from last year, but these aren't looking in great shape. Like that one is really squashy, and but I'm going to try because I don't like wasting things. So these actually have the packet with them still, and they say they like to be planted 10 centimetres deep. So again, realistically, you're looking at twice the depth of the bulb. So I'm just going to push these in with my hands. I mean, the good thing about planting in pots as opposed to in the ground is you can actually plant things a lot closer, especially with tulips. I mean, if you wanted to do a whole pot of tulips, you can really cram them in, and then you get an amazing display. Whereas if you're planting them in the ground, you know, you really need to stick to the spacing that you're advised to. Yeah, these don't look great at all, but you never know. So a good thing is to try and imagine when they come up what it's going to look like. So I've got my hyacinths in the middle because they're quite bushy. You know, look at the pictures and see what it is you're planting. And also, if you're planting different bulbs in one pot, try and get things that flower at a similar time, then you'll get a really nice display. Or there is another option that if you get flowers at different times, you can sort of plant them in layers, and they call it making a lasagna. So you know, you might have really early daffodils followed by tulips, followed by, you know, whatever. So decide, you know, when you're buying the bulbs, have a real think about what it is. Do you want them all to flower at once, or would you like to have a bit of, you know, colour throughout the spring season? Yeah, there's a few more mushy ones in here. Unfortunately, that does happen. So over time, you lose a few, but you can always replace them. And the other thing, you know, if you bought new bulbs and you've had them in a pot the first year, you know, you can always dig them up and put them in the ground, and then they'll stay. You know, they'll keep coming up. So, especially tulips. I have a customer that I go to, and she buys like 200 tulip bulbs every year to do her pots, and then once they've had their first year, she just plants them out in the garden, and it's a really good cheap way of getting loads and loads of colour into your garden in the spring. Well, you have to be a bit more careful with tulips because they are quite prone to rotting, and they're also quite tasty for squirrels. So yeah, if you're planting tulips in the ground, just wait until November or as late as you can, because that's less chance of them getting soaking and then freezing and then rotting. So yeah, that's all my bulbs in. Shuffle them around a little bit. Yeah, and then just going to put a layer of grit over the top, which just keeps the moisture in. So there we go, and I want these to flower at their natural time, so I'm going to leave them outside, probably cover them with a newspaper, or I have some really good jute sacks, which are great because they are breathable and they let moisture in and out. And the key thing is really, if you live in a really harsh area that gets really frozen in the winter, yeah, cover them. You know, I've got a little porch outside my front door, which is always really good for just poking stuff under there. It protects it from the frost a little bit. But even if you don't have that, I mean, you can put them in a shed for a couple of months, or even just really close to a building wall, because they get that little bit of extra warmth and the shelter from the wall. So that's it really. I mean, it really is that easy. And not all of these might come up again because they are a bit old, and some of them have just been sat in the packet, which you know it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's the taking part that counts. So I hope you're gonna have a go. And I'll make some more videos, but I'd really like it if you could post some of your some photos, or let us know how you're getting on, and any questions under the video. Otherwise, yeah, I'll be doing some more videos shortly, and thank you for watching. It's been really nice. Thanks. I'll see you soon.